Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, a new Battlegrounds meta is set to start in a few hours from now, and obviously we are as always going to break it down. We're gonna figure out what should and should not work, and then I am going to make some predictions of champions or point out a few champions that could be quite interesting to use as well. So let's start with the offensive buff. It's the same as we have currently in Victory Track and Gladiator Circuit. So every 5 critical hits a skill attacker lands, purifies all non-damaging debuffs on them. And in this case, this node will actually have even more interaction with with 2 of the 3 defensive nodes. So one of the defensive nodes is whenever the attacker dodges an attack, that is effectively meaning uses a dexterity mastery in order to dex away from a projectile or a basic attack. Both champions are inflicted with a heal block debuff, a taunt debuff, their attack rate reducing their attack rating by 10%, and a disorient debuff reducing their defensive ability accuracy and block proficiency by 10%. These debuffs last 7 seconds. So there are obviously some immediate implications in this. Some of your parries might get messed up by that. Some of the regen champions will be less effective if you do have the heal block on. But perhaps most importantly, this will also trigger inequity mastery. Therefore, before we are going any further, any single player who has access to inequity mastery is already going to have fairly big advantage in a generic situation, because every single time you dex, you get 3 debuffs on you. If you have 3 debuffs on you, that already reduces your attack by 18%, which is a very significant amount, let alone if you do get these debuffs, in doubled, in case you need to escape from an unblockable attack, which is something that will happen, as we're going to discuss in a moment. Therefore, cutting down your attack by 36%, or effectively a third, and that is a very, very big deal. Right. So inequity mastery is super important. There is a bit more advanced issue with this for some of the top tier players, because of the constant presence of heal block, you could technically save yourself quite a lot of points if you choose not to go for willpower. But without willpower, you can't access inequity. So I still personally will be running willpower, maybe at one point though, but I will definitely be maxing out my inequity. Right. So steady build up unblockable. The defender has 100% increased defensive ability accuracy. When the attacker has 3 or more debuffs, the defender becomes unblockable until the attacker has 0 debuffs. Whenever the attacker purifies a debuff, they become unblockable for 7 seconds. So this node, in its essence, in its pure format, in combination with Chum Waters, every time you dodge an attack, your opponent is going to go unblockable, unless you're immune to heal block or one of the other debuffs, or immediately shrugs them off. But vast majority of the champions will have to deal with the unblockable. And again, keep in mind that every consecutive time you dex an attack, because at that point opponent is already unblockable, you're going to be stacking on more and more debuffs on you. Right. The key sleeper line here is that the defender has 100% increased defensive ability accuracy, which means in plenty of times, neutralize is not going to be as effective, and opponents will still get buffs through them being neutralized. It also means some evade champions, like I believe I have popped up here, well, for Spider-Gwen. All of her evade chances are doubled, so unless you're going to have evade counter, it's going to be a very, 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 very rough going there, and so on and so forth. So champions like, not Electro, but whoever deals some sort of damage on being hit, whoever has a chance to go invisible or evade, all of those abilities are set to trigger twice as often as they used to for the most part, and that is quite a tricky thing. So again, evade characters will be quite significantly more difficult to deal with. I'm not too worried about that though, because obviously this meta is skill centric and there will be a lot of skill champions running around. Therefore, I do not expect a particularly large use of science champions overall, but it is still something super important to keep in mind. The key for this meta, in my opinion, will be champions who inflict at least 1 debuff on you that is hard to avoid. And because then once you get these 3 debuffs on you, and they expire because they have a duration of 7 seconds, they will still remain, opponents' defenders will still remain unblockable because you might have some debuff struggled on you from somewhere else. Like obviously Null will pretty much be unblockable the entire time, right? Or any other champion that just happens to put a debuff on you as you fight them. I don't know, Spider-Ham, for instance. If you hit him, you get that taunt on you. That's it. Then once you dex, they're going to be permanently unblockable. Now, there is an upside, though, because the attacker's critical hits have 50% chance to grant an indefinite steadfast charge. Each charge allows the attacker to block one unblockable hit and is removed after the hit. But as long as you get one charge, you're kind of good, because then you can parry and you can land a full combo, and chances are you're probably going to crit again to get another charge or something of the sort, bait out special attack. So this is definitely going to be a very useful node, and therefore champions with higher crit chance, higher crit ratings are going to be significantly easier to use. Right, some individual champions to look at, as I mentioned, I think Photon is going to be absolutely brutal, both defensively and offensively, because as a defender, when you fight against Photon, you get debuffs on you, and yeah, there's just going to be no way. You're going to be consistently on max debuffs and max inequity and all that other stuff, so Photon should be quite rough. And offensively, Photon should still be very, very, very potent and very good, because you do have a ton of fail safes, a ton of ways to manage opponent. You do have your miss after level 2s, or when you get parried, you go invisible as well. Thus, you can use that as an extra opening too. And in general, I expect her to be absolutely present and dominant. As I mentioned, Spider evade characters will be more potent than they normally are. Something like Scorpion, again, Scorpion does have X amount of chance to evade with his Scorpion sense, and which is 20% chance to evade, right? When the Scorpion sense is active. Now it's going to be like 30% chance to evade. That means as soon as he's going to get his Scorpion sense, it's going to be rough going. So Scorpion is going to be much more dangerous defensively. I think Jessica Jones could be absolutely brutal as well, in between her level 1 debuffs, and every time you activate a special attack, you getting debuffs, thus she will go unblockable. And if you have any other debuff from anywhere else in the fight, it is going to be a problem. But also, if you happen to dex a single time against her, she's already pretty much ramped up, and the fight's going to go sideways. So Jessica is definitely going to be one of those champions that can trap people in. Void, for obvious reasons, you dex once, you get 3 debuffs on you, and Void eats away a significant chunk of your health. Then we're going to have, Kingpin. Kingpin's going to be a bit tricky to use because opponent's going to start unblockable because you're going to have more than 3 debuffs on you. But in general, the extra access to debuffs is only going to feed Kingpin's damage, which is going to be absolutely brutal. Baron Zemo, in theory, has a perfect meta here because you can dex twice, and you can root the opponent, and then you can supercharge your own speed. So Baron Zemo could be a worthwhile rank up for the next meta, for obviously defensive purposes as well as offensive ones. Jabari Panther should thrive and be absolutely amazing. Shang-Chi, or in general, pretty much any skilled champion is going to be significantly better than they normally would be, because typically skilled champions do have relatively decent or high crit chance or crit rating, and in between both of the nodes and their fondness for purification abilities, vast majority of skilled champions will be great, either because of their own purify, or either because they crit a lot and they can use the purify node for every 5 crits. So yeah, beware, skilled champions will still probably be running around. With skilled champions running around, obviously, so will be mutant champions in order to counteract them. I do think Havoc is going to be crazy good as well, because as soon as you let any one of his feedback fall on you, you basically can't dex. And if you dex against him, because you probably will have to, because at some point his specials are going to be unblockable, you're going to be debuffed the entire fight. So Havoc should be crazy good. Onslaught obviously is going to be putting in work left, right, and center. Domino, again, due to increased defensive ability accuracy, is going to be even more annoying than normal. Then we're going to have Toad, obviously, again, more annoying defensively than he normally would be, applying his poisons more frequently on you, and then offensively purifying the skill debuffs like crazy. Which leads, again, I think this is going to be the same logical chain of skill champions, mutant champions, and then tech champions. Tech champions also synergize quite well with the goal of the node or the issues of the meta, because you will be perfectly fine at the first part of the meta until you need to start baiting out special attacks, and that is where you will be forced to dex, right? So if you have to bait out special attack and your opponent doesn't immediately throw it, chances are you will dex and opponent's going to go unblockable, then their special attack is going to be unblockable, which means you didn't have to dex again, which means there's going to be more debuffs involved, and it can, go downhill quite fast from there. Therefore, power control in itself is going to be super important, because if you can play in a manner where you don't have to bait out special attacks, you also can play in a manner where you pretty much can not dex. Like with Warlock, for instance, because, as long as you have debuff on them, they will be losing power, and you can be as aggressive as they want. And if they do happen to throw a special attack, unless there is some, very specific reason why you cannot block it, Warlock plus armor rating, you probably can take that on block as well. So yeah, Warlock should be quite great. Red Skull should be amazing for this. Is another meta where Red Skull should absolutely shine. And then we have Future Ant-Man. Again, you can play him in a manner where you basically never ever have to bait opponent's special attack, and in between his armors and glancing, you can, take just about anything in the block. Shuri is quite similar, where, she can block for days, and you can use your phasing in order not to dex, but, just around opponent's special hits that way. And defensively, obviously, Shuri is going to be quite rough to deal with as well. And here is one of the party champions, party peace champions, because this is going to be a bit of MCOC knowledge trivia dump here. A lot of people obviously are not currently too aware of Annihilus themselves. But the key point here, the most important point here about Annihilus is that whenever Annihilus gets taunted, let's read this line, while taunted, gain a true accuracy buff, an unblockable buff, and an unstoppable buff. And this will obviously work both offensively and defensively. So if you use Onslaught as an attacker, only thing you have to do is dex once. You're going to get a taunt placed on yourself, and then you're going to go unblockable, unstoppable, and you will have true accuracy buff. And obviously you're going to be able to be very, very aggressive at that point. And on defense as well, if you fight against Annihilus and if you happen to dex once, which you probably will, that means he's automatically going to get his unstoppable buff, unblockable buff, and true accuracy buff, which is going to only make that fight pretty much impossible unless you have a slow debuff on you for most part. So, obviously there will be options, there will be counters, just like any other champion. You can still, nuke him, and Mystic champions can go bypass him, but he's going to be significantly more effective than he normally would be. Now, obvious reasons here, debuffs for days, right? So put him on defense, he's going to be unblockable pretty much the entire fight. And you can also always use him offensively, because he does reduce opponent's combat power rate, which means you do need to bait out less special attacks as a general rule of thumb. And you can take some hits in the block, because he does have some regen ability too. Then we have Hulkling. Again, he's a type of champion that's almost impossible not to dex against, because of his pierces and you being unable to take, hits in block. So I think he's going to be extremely effective. Obviously, Maestro, kind of similar reasons. You cannot not dex some of his specials, plus he's always been a tank. From Mystics, I predict Hood to be extremely powerful offensively, especially if you have him at high sig, because Hood has a very potent power control. And that could be very, very helpful, especially together with the steadfast blocks and your phasing ability in order to gain openings. So I think Hood is going to be quite great. Longshot is going to be very good both offensively and defensively, and especially again with increased defensive ability accuracy. His his effects are going to trigger even more often. So if you're going to face Longshot as a defender, it's going to be quite rough for you to deal with, because if he's at max sig, he has 60% chance to nullify that dex that you will have to dex against him. And if you do dex, then, with increased defensive ability accuracy, it's very, very likely that he's going to nullify your dexterity buff, which is going to give him power and going to give him, a next special quicker, which presumably more than likely you will have to dex again, because it will be unblockable, and yeah, it can probably go quite rough, quite wrong, quite sideways. We have Dr. Doom, again, for very, very similar reasons. You cannot not dex really some of his specials, and offensively, he is one of those champions that can do an entire fight without baiting out an opponent's special attack, so I do suspect Dr. Doom's going to do just fine. I think America Chavez is going to be quite crazy good too for most of this. And Sasquatch, again, because he is one of those champions where you just have to get out of the way of the level 1, or every time he throws it, you might get stunned until he gets into Wrath of Tenrak, where you will get stunned. So you will have to dex that, and if you do, he's going to be unblockable, and you're going to have all the inequity and other bad side effects. So I do suspect Sasquatch is going to be quite rough to deal with as well. But that is, for most part, what I suspect of this meta. Let me know what are your thoughts, your opinions. Which champions do you think will do great? And I fully am aware of the fact that I did not mention all of the champions that possibly could do great. It's all simply impossible. Not a single player can think of everything immediately. So share your thoughts in the description below, and I'll catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about